I'm Dan Drake. This is Front Up on Geno TV and Channel 99. With us today is another one of the candidates in the Democratic primary for Tim Madden's seat, Mike Heylin.
Nice to meet you, Dan.
Excuse me, Heylin.
Thank you for having me.
Nice to have you. Tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're in the race and what experience you bring to this.
Gladly. I'm a Falmouth native. Went to Falmouth Public Schools for all 12 years. Graduate of Falmouth High School in '98. Ended up going to Worcester Polytech and then Fitchburg State for TV, film, video. I got my master's in business at Fitchburg State. Spent 6 years or so traveling the world doing news stories. I worked for ESPN, HBO, MSNBC. I got married, and I left that job and started my own nonprofit TV station. So for the past 8-9 years,
Geno.
I've met Geno. Yes, myself and Geno have crossed paths, I'm sure, at some point in time doing the news stuff. But I left that life and I started my own nonprofit public access TV station. So for the past 8 or 9 years, I've been taking the voice of the politicians at the State House, making television shows and bringing them to the constituents. So I've worked with state senators Mark Pacheco, Michael O'Moore, Congressman Stephen Lynch, Martha Coakley, Suzanne Bump, Steve Grossman, everyone from national down to selectmen, planning board, school committee. So I have a wide understanding of how politics works from the hyper-local to the national level.
What about on some of the issues? What sort of experience do you have on those?
So the biggest issues right now, and I'll start with the heroin epidemic. I've worked for many years with DAs Cruz, DA Sam Sutter, DA Tom Quinn. We started off, getting the word out there about the heroin epidemic. Currently, I am working with DA Tom Quinn in a nonprofit called Corey's Cause. There's a very small percentage of the annual budget that goes to education. Most of it goes to treatment, recovery. And I would like to change that, add money to the budget, because we need to have these high school kids realize that, heroin doesn't only kill, it also disables. So the gentleman I'm working with is 28, and his story is similar to many stories. He was 18, had a shoulder injury in high school, got prescribed prescription pain medication, hooked on heroin. He was in Falmouth a few years ago and overdosed. He was in a coma for 5 days, and now his brain capacity is 30% roughly. So I filmed a short documentary with him called Corey's Cause, and we show it to high schools along with the DA, and it shows high school students that you're in high school and college, you don't think about dying. But when you see a man who was an all-star baseball athlete who's now at 30% capacity, you think about that. And doing heroin just one time can cause that. And that's what I'm focusing on right now is recovery. We have to continue that with different MATs and whatnot, but we also need to stop it before it starts. That's a big thing.
What are a couple of the other issues that in fact affect the entire district?
So one of the big things is I worked with Sam Sutter, who was the DA, then the mayor of Fall River, and we fought to get Pilgrim power plant closed, nuclear power plant closed. We partnered with Cape Downwinders, making TV shows. People don't realize that if Pilgrim has an issue, the wind is going to blow right to us, and we're going to get the fallout from that. So I worked with him. We marched on Pilgrim, and he got that closed down, and we're going to get that closed down safely. So
is nuclear power per se a bad thing?
It's a bad thing if the storage is not proper and if there's a leak, and that's the issue. And the way the winds blow, nuclear power, if there was a leak, we're going to be getting all that the bad stuff coming our way. So renewable energy seems to be the wave that we're going to, and I've worked with Senator Mark Pacheco on a couple different things. Years ago, I worked with Senator Mark Pacheco to keep Taunton State Hospital open. We marched on at the State House, and we kept that open. As far as Taunton State Hospital and nurses go, people don't talk about nursing much right now, but there's a safe level of nurses to patients, and there's no legislation to keep that safe staffing level going. And it's roughly 1 in 6. So once a nurse has more than 6 patients, the mortality rate skyrockets exponentially. So I would like to see legislation that a nurse in a normal hospital has no more than 6 patients. The other thing is Mark Pacheco is big on the wind turbines. And I'm for the wind turbines, but I keep saying to everyone along this whole election that I will not do anything that affects our district negatively. And we've had a problem in Falmouth with the wind turbines in people's backyards.
Right.
And they wanted to put wind turbines up along the shoreline, which is going to affect, many things that we do as a district, tourism. I'm all for it, but not if it's going to negatively affect our other industries. So we have to take that into account
In
too.
other words, not in my backyard, basically.
Well, in my backyard, if it's way out in my backyard, not right in my backyard. And it's, you have to realize that because they did a study in North Carolina that if the wind turbines are seen from the shoreline, people will not vacation there. And I know that Falmouth, a lot of our money comes from tourism, and I would assume that Nantucket, you guys have a little bit of tourism money coming in, right?
I think a little
Just
bit.
a little bit, yeah. So, and then so for every action that we do as legislators and locally, there's a reaction, and we have to minimize the effect on our local economy and our environment. So.
It's a very diverse district. You've got the western half of Falmouth down to Woods Hole. You've got the 6 towns on the vineyard, which apparently can agree on very little, and you've got Nantucket. Do you see any issues that are peculiar to Nantucket, or peculiar to the vineyard, or peculiar to Falmouth?
So the one thing I will say is that this came up the other day. We did a radio debate in Woods Hole, and Senate Bill 2311 came out. And that was the Senate bill to rezone. Basically, it gives the state power to rezone how they feel. They get 120 days. And after 120 days, they can rezone a parcel of land anywhere how they see fit. And it's great for affordable housing. But affordable housing in Falmouth, one of my opponents was talking about putting up 3-family houses on Main Street. It's not going to fit the feel of Main Street. And then there was also talks about putting, affordable housing apartment complexes on the islands. And I don't think Nantucket can afford to have these large apartment complexes that there might be in Worcester or Boston. So once again, it's an action-reaction, action-consequence where we need affordable housing, but we have to do it intelligently and not have the state decide. You don't need a bunch of people from Boston saying, we're doing this in Boston, you guys can do it in Nantucket, and then just throw up large apartment complexes. It doesn't work here. It's going to be negative to our environment. And we have to kind of balance both of those things.
How do you propose to keep in touch with your broad-ranging constituency if you're elected?
So if elected, office hours would be a big thing. We'd have an office over here. I know that Tim Madden has an office in Falmouth, and he has an aide in Falmouth who does a great job. So obviously, if elected in West Falmouth, I would have an office here and an aide on the islands. Come over, have regular weekly office hours where I can talk to people. I'm out and about, and I would come to different events. In Nantucket, I've been here for your town meeting, your town election, Daffodil Days. It's a fascinating place. Come out here, meet the people, but also have a scheduled office hours where people can come and explain what they need.
Let me rephrase my earlier question a
Yes.
little bit. Are there any issues unique to Nantucket that you think the legislature needs to consider when talking about health care, when talking about water quality, when talking about affordable housing? Or do you think they're common to all the towns?
It's kind of a trick question.
It is a trick question.
They're unique, but they're all connected. For instance, I've done a lot of work, and I've been working with the folks in Falmouth, and we've started not myself personally, but people I know started an oyster fishery, where they 2.5 million oysters, and they purchase them as babies. They grow the oysters to an inch and a half, and the inch and a half oysters can filter 50 gallons of water a day. So it is a way to help with the nitrates in our water, and that's something that we can bring to Nantucket. And
Nantucket has it.
Oh, fantastic! And
Nantucket has an oyster farm. We're building an oyster reef.
And then now the one thing that I would like to push is that if we could then take those oysters at a certain point and sell them back to oyster farms.
They
do that here.
too.
Fantastic. See, that's we have to do more of that kind of stuff. Helps the environment, helps the economy. So those things are similar to Falmouth, the Vineyard, and Nantucket. And the biggest difference between Falmouth and Nantucket and the Vineyard is the environment on Nantucket and the Vineyard is much more fragile because of you're an island upon yourself, and we need to make sure the environment is.
Well, let me turn that around and say, the bay scallop industry in Falmouth is no longer existent, basically. On the vineyard, a phrase I used the other day was it's on life support. And they're all propagated
Yeah.
and then put in the water to grow. Here, the fishery still survives. So maybe the answer in each place is a different one to how to approach the issue, to either return, if possible, this fishery to the Falmouth, to expand it on the vineyard, and to keep it alive here.
That's what, and then that might need government subsidies, get that going on Falmouth and the vineyard. But I mean, that's huge for our environment and the economy. And they're similar issues. We just have to make sure that the way that they're addressed are unique, I guess.
Or at least fit the needs of the communities that they're trying to help.
That's the whole thing. And also, the other thing is that Falmouth, the vineyard, and Nantucket, and we all have our own feel. And I came over here with my daughters recently, and my 4-year-old, we come up Main Street, and she says, "Oh, are we in Epcot?" Because the Main Street has a special feel to it, and you don't want to lose that feel. You don't want to lose what makes Nantucket special by doing things that might work in other places of the state.
Final question before I let you speak for yourself. What do you think about the Steamship Authority? Good, bad, indifferent, responsive, non-responsive?
So
It's obviously there's a perspective from the Cape and Martha's Vineyard. There's a perspective from the Cape and Nantucket. What's your take on it?
My view on the steamship is that I think that people complain about the steamship coming through Woods Hole to go to Martha's Vineyard, but people don't talk about the amount of economy and tourism that the steamship breeds in Woods Hole. There are people who come to Woods Hole, will stay in a hotel, eat at the restaurants, take the steamship over to the vineyard for the day and come back. Now, if we move all of the steamship to New Bedford, for instance, the people coming from New York, Connecticut, and getting on New Bedford, Falmouth is going to lose a lot of that tourism money. So the steamship's not going away, and it's going to come over one way or the other. We need to make it work best for us. Get the most bang for our buck, the most economic dollars, and then also have them, buy into things that will fix our environment as much as possible, lessen the environmental impact.
I haven't asked anybody else this question, but I'm going to ask you anyway. Down in North Carolina, to take a 2.25 ferry ride, 2.25 hour ferry ride, essentially the same as from Hyannis to Nantucket, is about $20 for the car. To Nantucket, it's about $500 round trip, $250 one way.
Okay.
Both state agencies, one a direct agency, one an authority. Which one's right?
So, one of the things I've said in my campaign from the get-go is there seems to be a bias towards the 128 belt, and this is throughout the whole state. If you live inside that 128 belt, the government subsidies is far greater than living outside the 128 belt. I'll get to your question in 1 second, but just to get my question,
you're getting there.
$3.4 billion is what it will cost to get a train from Boston to Fall River. And the legislator doesn't want that. A lot of towns don't want that. But for the same $3.4 billion, they're willing to extend the Green Line 2 miles from Somerville to Medford. Now, my problem with that is that they are subsidizing, the Mass Pike is subsidized for people that live in the 128 belt, where people who live in Orange, Mass are paying $2 to go 2 miles, whatever it might be.
Right.
And here on Nantucket, the Vineyard, Falmouth, we don't get the same subsidies as they're getting in the 128 belt. And I keep saying this, is that what happens is that about 2 weeks before Memorial Day, the state comes in and says, we're going to fix everything. And they paint the bridges, they put Band-Aids on the roads, and then we say, we have larger issues. And they said, we're going to get to it after the summer. And then we say, we need this after the summer. And then come Labor Day, we say, okay, great, all the tourists are gone, you got to help us. And they say, ooh, ran out of money, we'll talk to you next year. And that continues to happen. We need someone who's going to fight for, you're right, the steamship from Hyannis to Nantucket, that should be much better subsidized, so people who, let's be honest, the cost of living and working in Nantucket is outrageous, and people who work on the mainland, Hyannis, need to get back and forth. And they should be subsidized much greater than we're getting subsidized now. And there seems to be a preference to let's keep saying the 128 belt. And someone who
Well, there are more per square mile, more about legislators per square mile.
there's 17 legislators that live in Boston proper.
Right.
We don't have 17 legislators living in the entirety of the Cape. And whoever gets elected to the seat needs to work for the people of Nantucket, the Vineyard, and Falmouth, and not be an 18th vote for Boston. I mean, they have enough votes. We need someone who will stand up and fight for what we need here. And that might be government subsidies, fight for the environment, fight for the economy, fight for all this stuff. We don't need someone who is going to go into Boston and just do whatever is told of them. You know, we can't, and I can't, at least myself, I can't mortgage my children's future to make someone from Boston a little bit richer in their pension. And that's the truth.
So how would you like the voters to think about you and remember you as they go into the primary next week?
That's a good question. So I've always been someone, I'm knowledgeable with local government, I'm knowledgeable with state government. I have worked with state government. I've been on the national board of a nonprofit. In Falmouth, I am constantly getting involved. I've been appointed to 3 different committees, cultural, cable, and the rec committee. I go to the selectmen's meeting regularly and voice my opinion. I fought the selectmen on bylaws that were unconstitutional, and I just won one last week. You need someone who, a local person, a member of the community who's going to, be the voice of the people against the establishment. And what we don't need is someone else who's just going to follow status quo and go along to get along. You need someone to actually be the voice of the people. And if that's me, great. If that's not me, I mean, you have people on Nantucket who are fantastic candidates. There's people in the Vineyard who are fantastic. There's people in Falmouth. You need to pick the person who you know when you call or you talk to, they're going to do all they can to fight for you and not fight for career politicians and lobbyists in Boston.
Mike Heylin, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.